Hi, I'm Sam Sells, and welcome to my podcast, Clean Money. I'm a serial entrepreneur that has led over 2 billion development projects around the world. But the work I am most proud of is the work we do here at Wild Mountain Capital. We not only create great returns for our socially conscious investors, but we make an impact in the many communities we work in and we change lives. I like to say investing matters, and my show is to talk with everyday folks that are not only creating great success, but making an impact in society and improving the lives of others. That is my mission, and I want to share my stories and others with you. Welcome to Clean Money. Thank you for joining with us today for another great episode of Clean Money, where we talk about making a difference in the world through our investments of time and resources. My guest today is Drew Boyer, which I'm pretty excited about. Drew is an experienced financial expert and a certified financial planner with over 2 decades of experience helping individuals and families navigate their financial journeys. Raised in Ohio, Drew's upbringing shaped his values of hard work, financial responsibility, and entrepreneurship, lessons that he now imparts to his clients and readers alike. But that's not even the great interesting part. I Let's get to know you a little bit more, Drew, and folks listening, because Drew's going to talk about this intersection between hip hop music and money, which is super, super interesting. So, Drew, tell us a little bit more about yourself. Oh, there we go.
Hey, thanks for having me, Sam. First off, great head of hair. I wish I had that. And and secondarily, if your podcast was called Dirty Money, I don't think my compliance department would have allowed me on here.
Yeah.
So we'll keep it clean, and I'll do my best to keep it entertaining for you.
Heck yeah, thank you.
So yeah, great. So I'm in my 21st year of doing. I'm a certified financial planner, helping out a lot of different families. I have a ton of first responder families, so a lot of firefighters, police officers, and just great blue collar Americans that are trying to get ahead in life and live that American dream. And I've devoted my life now over half of it to doing this mission and helping people out. And I got started in 2003, and I got started without knowing a whole lot, and started off in a very small mutual fund company called Why Don't Read. And I did that for about 5 years. I got my 10,000 hours in, and I figured out that I didn't know anything because the great financial crisis came and collided with everyone then. And I've learned to never stop learning ever since, and just be curious. Keep your eyes looking around at all times to see what's going on. And shortly after that, I went independent for the first time for about another 6 years. And then since then, I've been with LPL and Private Advisor Group, and just being free to do the right thing for my clients and keep their best interests out there, and not stuff or force feed proprietary funds down people's throats, but truly live out being a financial planner. And so earlier, I would say probably late last year, earlier this year, I had this idea of drawing from my musician past, because before I had to grow up and get a real job, I was a drummer in bands, and so the beats have always been with me. I'm sure, do you have a talent that you can just do that you've never had to learn before?
Oh my. One is grow hair. I've been pretty good at that so far. But a little bit of that's chasing, as I get older. I it's interesting. In high school I was a drummer, did that for a while. Super, super fun. Never great though, and couldn't pursue that as a career, which is pretty dang difficult. Um,
Yep.
but one of the things I think that's just come naturally to me over the years is just my desire and ability to create by pulling people together to accomplish something that I think is remarkable and amazing. But uh, yeah, that's what comes natural to me. Everything else has been, man,
Working for it. That's
yeah.
why it means more. For whatever reason, I got a pair of drumsticks in my hand in sixth grade, and I think that's awesome. That it's the best musical instrument to learn because we don't play notes, right? But everybody always needs a drummer, it seems like, so it's an easy way to get into bands. But I was able to pick up the sticks and just sit down, and it made sense. and kind of like math for me and finance. So in my world, being a left-hander, it's that's what makes sense to me. So I'd been doing this and pursuing it through high school. I went to college, got in some bands, and then had a short little stint after college where I was going up to Brooklyn and playing every couple months up there. And I met all the actors slash models slash waiters slash all these everybody could play five different instruments and look like a supermodel. And I'm like, well, at least I can't say that I didn't try. So it was a good experience, but
Sure.
I ultimately settled back into this and, doing, 2 decades of work. Um, I tend to have a lot of energy and I was getting a little bit going through the motions with things. And I was thinking long term about legacy. If I'm mid career, what's a way that I can give back and take my first love of music with my love of finance and fuse them together. And that's where the idea came up with for the book. And I've always been fascinated that music is something that we all share. It's the universal language. But personal finance is it's called personal for a reason. It's very private. And in my office here, I have all kinds of interesting conversations with clients and prospects alike to problem solve. And it's a lot like playing jazz music sometimes. I have to bob and weave with what people throw at me, and I love that about my work. So I've lived through lots of ups and downs and seen a thing or two, and I'm sure we'll see some more. But I'm happy to put something back in the world like a book that really blends the two together, makes it very easy to understand, and I'm telling personal finance through different rappers and their mistakes they made, or their huge accomplishments in the same aspect. So that's what I've been working on, and happy to share more about it.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that book that you wrote. What is it about, and what was it like to write it?
I'll start with what is it like to write it. It's kind of like climbing a mountain with a 2-year-old on your back, and you make progress, and then it's like I need a snack, right? Or a diaper change. For me, I try to get as much advice as I could about writing a book first, and this has to come up with a theme. And then the first couple chapters are pretty difficult to get started, but once you find a common rhythm, I found that it would kind of flow out of me. And so the first thing I did is put down my phone and turn the TV off. And I've never really binge watched anything, but I said, we'll keep totally focused on this and set up a structure for it. And about 5 hours on Saturdays and Sundays from January to March, I had my can in a seat, and I was just writing out whatever I could get coming of it. But I still had to do the day job, and so during the week, whenever I had an idea that would come to me, I would make a quick note, and then by the time I got to Saturday, I felt like it was bursting out of me. And so, you hike a little bit, you're making progress, you do what you can do. But I tried to make it very much like with the certified financial planner process. You have different things you need to take care of, like in structure. So if a client comes to me and they're in debt, there's a great quote in the book, and if you've heard of Warren Buffett before, he's generally accepted as the goat of investing. But he has a really great quote about, when you find yourself in a bad spot, he's like, when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. Stop making the problem worse. First step, right? And so getting out of debt, the book, when I was 18, I like to think that I would have read this book and I would have known about the $100,000 of bad debt that I got myself into, within 7 years from that. So from 18 to 25. And it wasn't terrible decisions. I did normal things like go to Ohio State University. I ran up about $25,000 of debt there. I had some like parental loans that I didn't quite know about. One was like getting a truck so I could get around to work. Um, my parents didn't have extra money to just pay it for me, and so I was expected to pay that back. And then when I eventually graduated, when I was 22, 23, getting into this business, most like other businesses, if you're self-employed, you got to build a book of business from zero to something. And I quite honestly struggled for the first 2 or 3 years, like most people that start a small business. And after I graduated college, Discover Card was so kind that they're very bright on my future, and they sent me a credit card with a $20,000 limit. I did not use this card for having fun. I did not use it for buying anything I didn't need. Uh, the devil in the details were right after right after I graduated. I had to start paying my parents back monthly, and then I got this card that came in the mail, and it was more money than I'd earned in any year of my life up to that point. The limit was, which didn't make any
Yeah.
sense to me. And then they started mailing me these checks that would come in the mail, and although I know checks are coming a thing of the past, and that just to make ends meet from to month, I would occasionally write a check to myself just to put some money in there to pay for rent or food, like the basics. So I really feel like I'm in touch with some people that are out there struggling right now. They're just getting started, and so that all ended up where I had about 50,000 of credit card debt at one point, and I got to the point where I stopped digging. Uh, Love them or hate them. One of the biggest shows back in the early 2000s was The Apprentice, and I remember watching President Trump on there, and he would do the "You're fired" the Cobra, and that was cheap entertainment for somebody that couldn't go out. And so, I got hooked into that show watching it, and I liked the entrepreneurial spirit there. And I read a couple of the books, and one of them he's writing about the fact where he became a billionaire and then and under his head $1 billion. And he's telling this story where he's walking with his daughter, and he's like, "See that bum over there? He has $1 billion more than me." And so I looked at myself. I'm like, "Well, I'm only 100,000 in debt. That seems a hell of a lot less than $1 billion. So I can do this." And one of the things that really struck with me is he said banks would rather get something rather than nothing. And so I kind of put this into practice and called into the credit card companies when they're charging these 30% rates. And, part of that, like, trying to build this ladder to get out of the hole I was in. And I said, I can't pay you next month. And they say, please hold. And they send me over to debt remediation department. And they're like, how would you like a 5% rate? You can get paid off in 60 months. You're just not allowed to use this card anymore, and it won't wreck your credit score. And I said, I'll take it. I was flabbergasted. It worked. After that, I called the next one and the next one. I then got up and I talked to my parents about the debt I owed them, and it turned out a lot of it was for a truck that said just to get around and work during college. And they eventually said, you know what, we didn't realize that this was a burden, and we're going to help you out there. And I got rid of that. And then I took all this momentum, the bravado I had, and I called up the student loans. And so I called in the Department of Education. I'm like, hey, I'd like to get a lower interest rate and stretch this out longer. And they're like, not going to happen. I'm like, what do you mean? You already have the lowest interest rate possible, and you already have it for 20 years. We don't do anything else. And that's when I learned that the government plays by different rules.
Yep. And they don't care.
They don't
It's
care. It's their
yeah.
game. Yep. So
Yeah.
I say all that because I got ahead at work, and every month, within less than 5 years, I got myself debt free. I started learning, how valuable it is to have a great credit score. All these things that no school teaches you, and if you're lucky, you have a parent or some other family member or maybe a mentor that can help you out on this. And I had to learn the ways of entrepreneurism. My parents certainly raised us to work hard and be entrepreneurs. And if you have a debt, pay it. um, but like the common thing, if you're an entrepreneur and you're getting paid $1,000, no one's withholding taxes off of that. And so you have this bad surprise that happens the following April 15th. So, a piece of advice in the book is to always save back like 30% of what you make, so you don't go through the bad surprise that I had to eventually get to. And then once you start making money, having a budget, once you have a budget, you gotta don't spend everything you make. Obviously, that's hard when you again live in a country where we make $1, but we spend $1.23, I believe is what it is right now,
Yeah.
uh, every year. And then if you have leftover money, how do you invest? And then my favorite chapter title that I made up, I call my chapters tracks to keep it entertaining because I wanted to have the music element. It's the boringest subject in my business. It's taxes, it's legal, it's insurance, and I knew that I had to come up with something that would make people spit coffee out of their mouth if they did it. And so I named that track title. It's called "Back Your Assets Up," and there's many of these names in there is to keep you entertained. And that's how I run meetings here. Is I try to entertain my clients, ultimately to educate them. Then and then the final chapter is basically about, how to make what you're talking about here, where you're taking your investments and you're compounding them over time, or how does your time compound to give back? And so I went with that off of the classic NWA record, straight out of Compton. I went straight out of Compound. So
Nice. Nice.
I've always had to do little. I like to have dual meetings and make it fun and keep it entertaining.
So speaking of dual meanings, you said you like to help people get out of debt row.
Yep.
Um, tell us what that is. What are you talking about?
So that's a play on Death Row Records from the '90s, and where Dre was there. He started it with Suge Knight, and they brought on Snoop and then Tupac. So they call it Death Row Records. So I thought it would be a funny, just switch it up and call it Debt Row, because when you're in that much debt, like how I felt is I was imprisoned and I didn't know how I was going to get off of it. And so that's the meaning behind the title there, is to get off debt row and start stacking your cash flow.
Love it. Love it. How's that been received with your clients?
It's the single best thing, and there's also a story in there, but I asked people, what's your first hip hop song that you remember hearing, and where were you at? How did that feel? Um, I usually started it off because they look at me and, I'm just a white guy from Ohio, and I was raised in the country. And how did I get into hip hop at all? Because I love all kinds of music and jazz and symphony and rock, everything that's out there. And I had a story that I went in and I had heard this radio station out of Cleveland, which is the nearest, the big town next to us. And I remember the song started off with these girls talking, and then it was like the bass comes in and then the drums, and then the rapper goes, "I like big butts." So Sir Mix-a-Lot. And so there's a story of me, saving up money from my chores, and I go to the mall, to the record store, and you remember the parental advisory stickers were brand new back then in the mid '90s, early '90s, and so it'd be like NWA or Two Life Crew. And being a middle child, I was kind of drawn to be to rebelliousness, and so I felt a little rebellious just going up and looking at these records and getting them. And I bought this record, and we're in the car driving home with my mom and my two other brothers. And she's like, "Hey, what did you get?" I'm like, "You're not gonna like it. You won't be interested in it." She listened to Enya and Kenny G,
Oh yeah.
and she's like, "I insist. Let me put it in." And you hear the girls talking like, "Oh my God, Becky," and it's going da, 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 da. And then I got ejected. And then as soon as I got home, my parents' one rule is that if we bought something they didn't approve of, that it would be seized and destroyed. And that single met its fate with my dad's sledgehammer. And so that's when I learned that words have meaning, and music got super interesting. And hip hop was this rebellious spirit about making it. And I've been in love with it ever since.
So tell us, so hip hop, and we were talking about this before. I mean, in hip hop, they're very upfront about the desire to have a lot of money. Like
Hmm.
personally have a lot of money. They not only do want to have it, they want to show it, right? It's through the fanciest cars, the fanciest, like whatever money can buy, and they can attach to their body or show off to other people. Like that's the objective. Whereas in reality, most people with their money, they don't want to talk about it. Like it's offensive. How dare you ask me how much I make a year? Kind of thing. So personal finances are, like you said, very personal. So how do those two combine?
So one of the interesting things that when I found out doing research for the book, and again, I'm a child of the '90s, and growing up, you would see these videos with all the extravagant cars and women and all these things, the gold and jewelry. All of it was rented. They didn't own it. It was this thing that was it's an image that they put up to sell you that they were super successful, and I believe it worked for a little while. Um, there's all kinds of these stories, and I talk about it in chapter one on Debt Rose about MC Hammer, that he just shot up to fame very quickly. It's a lot like lottery winners, if you inherit money, what comes quick usually leaves quick. And he had made something like $70 million in 3 years, but in bankruptcy court. he found out that he was in debt for $82 million. So he spent it so fast and furiously, he overspent by $12 million. And there seems to be a general lack of anybody for accountability. Usually you get in these situations where you're just surrounded by yes people, and no one's really holding you accountable, saying like maybe you shouldn't hire 200 people on staff for your production right now. And he was spending something like a half a million to $1 million a month on staff. Um, that that caught up to him, but it was his house that really is what cost him a lot. And so I found it very interesting that the American dream is having the white picket fence and the house and son and daughter, a couple cars. They bought these mansions for $5 million or so, but then he sunk a further like 30 million into it, and of course that means you have to have gold statues of yourself, a gold toilet, and a gold hot tub. And no one said, "Hey, that might not be a great idea to do that." So that's one of these examples. Like, don't do this. They just tend to add a few more zeros and commas to their mistakes. But in America, besides the American dream, we tend to do a lot of celebrity worship, and that's probably not a great thing. Just like with Instagram nowadays, there's a lot of jealousy being bred. The only person that you should really be comparing yourself is who you were a year ago. And so I'm trying to bring up the fact that you might know more about these people that you've heard of before, but do you know that they made terrible mistakes? But maybe you should focus more on what you're doing and how to get ahead through personal financial planning. And don't make these guys bad mistakes and teaching these really, really over the top mistakes, but then teaching also some really over the top successes. And so chapter 5, it's called Speakers, Not Sneakers. And it's about the origin story of Beats by Dre. And by all accounts, Dre was already like a super wealthy, producer and musician by the time he came up with this idea. But I found it very fascinating that it would have never happened, I don't believe, without Napster, because this is when music got digitized and given away for free. And there's a quote in there saying, he's like, it's bad enough they're stealing my music. Now you got to listen to them on these cheap $1 iPod, headphones where you don't even have to feel the music, because he's all about the bass and running in the cars. And so they were thinking about how to bring back the feeling of that in this when the industry got completely shook up. And that's investing. That's investing. He solved the problem and came up with it. And it's just a genius story all the way around, how it started, how it ended, and a great story for everybody.
So how do your clients fall in the same trap?
Um, Acronyms like BOAT, break out another thousand, right? I love these. It's common money pitfalls that if you do this, it's going to cost you this. Uh, One of the big life lessons that I live by and what I try to give to everybody is stop impulse spending. And that's what's going on in the social media world, is like, here's something here on a celebrity, you should buy this right now. Um, Wait 1 week, then you'll know if you truly need it or if it was an impulse that you have. Let the moment pass, think about it for a while, and if you truly do need it, then you can figure it out. A Jay-Z quote's like, if you can't buy it twice, you can't afford it. I kind of like that quote. That kind of keeps you, don't live within your means. Um, that's a lot of budgeting. So I try to get my clients to think this way. And to go back on your other question, like what do they think about the hip hop thing? Almost everybody has a memory that they've got of their first hip hop song they've heard, where they were at, and it's just great to go back, nostalgia, and remember where you're at when you heard it.
Super, super cool. So what do you think for your clients, and what do you see the most often um, is really kind of what is hurting them the most right now?
So I would break it into two groups: retirees and younger kids just getting started. Retirees, the thing that's hurting them the most by far. A lot of people retire when they have their mortgage paid off, and working with a bunch of people that are in public safety, they all have pensions, right? And so you work an X amount of years, you have X amount of dollars per month coming in, and if you can get your mortgage paid off, generally and if you save a little bit of money, you can pretty much live a nice retirement year. The number one thing, because I'm working with people that are getting out after they put 25 years in at age 48, is health insurance. And so health insurance is easily about $2,500 a month, basically a mortgage payment, maybe for a decent sized house, even on today's interest rates. And so
Yeah.
that seems to be the biggest one to figure that until Medicare age, and then just all the federal rules and state rules and all these things the insurance rules that keep them completely in bewilderment about if they're doing the right thing or not. I feel great coming in and helping my clients to help navigate the best we can. Um, and then for the other section of people, kids just getting started, they're leaving school with all this debt. And again, mine was 25,000 after like 4 years at OSU, Ohio State. And it's easy to leave school now with 100,000. So that's quadrupled almost. And even if you get that under control and you have a good job and you are able to save, they're trying to get the American dream too. And interest rates going. Like I've been completely blessed by being able to get into a home, and my interest rate is in the twos. That's
Beautiful.
yeah, people would kill that for that now. Um, my younger assistant, who's 25 years old, is going through this where they just were able to find a place. But rates are, they went up about 5% in 1 year in 2022, and they really haven't come down that much. And so they're at sevens, and the prices of homes have gone from maybe 50,000 in the early 80s to a $500,000 to now. And the payments, it's a big obstacle for them to feel like they're taking part of the American dream or they have a piece of their own and get there. And so that's the difference is health insurance and I'd say homes instead of loans.
Yeah. So when we look at retirees, we have, the median income of a retiree is $47,000 a year, whereas the median house payment is close to, you know, 5,000 or 2,500 bucks a month. And so if they don't already own their home and they move or they want to move, most likely they cannot afford a house. So maybe they can afford an apartment and the average price rent for an apartment is $2,200.
Mm.
So you should, in theory, be at 1/3 of your total household income goes to your housing. So that means you need to make about $6,000 a month just to afford a, average price apartment. And so it's a struggle.
Yes.
Affordable housing is at crisis level and it, the feds try to kill everybody by doing, interest rate hike by, 500 basis points, 5%, like you said, which is more than double the fastest rate ever that's ever occurred before. The fastest before in a single year was 2% or 200 basis points. This one's five. And totally destabilized the commercial market. Um, Rents would have gone down, except for we had, 10 million people come, across the border, or however many that was. And so they just, rents haven't decreased. And so we're in this weird position, like in 2008, where rents did come down and house prices dropped significantly. We're just in this weird position where they haven't come down that significantly. Maybe 20%, maybe 15%. But like you brought up before, starting out at $50,000 for a house back in 2007 is what I was buying homes for 50 grand a piece, 50, 60 grand a piece down in downtown San Antonio. And now those homes are hundreds of thousands of dollars. Um, yeah, we haven't had a full reset of the prices. Um, and we won't.
Yep, I don't think so either. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's about a third. So in the book, I try to use these big numbers so you can understand. When banks underwrite you to get a loan, they're able to go up to 28% of your gross income. And you can do another, it's about 8% for an auto loan, which those are another thing that have gone through the roof as well. We've been living through a really wonky 5 years where I remember used cars were costing more than new. And we're trying to get things back in order, but there's a housing shortage. And that's why the prices are probably not going to be going down anytime soon. And I've been seeing some interesting things where you read about it where you have kids moving back home with their parents or I have a lot of clients that will build onto their home to provide like a mother-in-law suite. And so the grandmother will sell her home. They'll use that money to build onto their home. And then you might also be able to get the kids moved back too, and they can save up for a couple of years. Or there might be a gift that's given that can help them try to get some property. Um, Interesting enough, it's almost full circle. My dad and my mom and they grew up on dairy farms, and for a short while there, when they were alive, their grandparents were living under the same roof with their family. And I feel like we're probably getting back to that time before we can get caught up with this and try to make homes more affordable again. We'll see. Um, but the interest rates, the Federal Reserve raises interest rates to tell people stop buying crap you don't need. I'm going to tell you just go start buying stuff you don't need again. But for people that never needed to get a loan, this was essentially an idea you haven't heard of before, but a stimulus plan. If you had cash in the bank, and I remember shortly after I got started in '05, you could get 5% at a bank account. And grandma and grandpa used to put their money in there. They'd have no investment risk. And inflation would be like 3.5. So you get to keep the spread. And then for a long time, we did zero interest rates. And that's how it sounds like we were able to get some homes at decent rates there. And now they've popped back up. And the people that don't need loans for anything, they have cash in the bank, probably the uber wealthy, 5% on, $100,000 is a free $5,000 a year. That's some trips. But if you have $1 million in there, it's 50 grand. Um, so I think rates are a bit higher than where they need to be at. And the prices of things, though, are the biggest problem. And the only way to bring those down is deflation. And that's a really bad situation all around. I don't think that we can do that. So we have to find a way to grow and earn more money to be able to afford these things and keep the costs similar to where they're at.
So what do you think is going to happen with the new administration? You think there's going to be some deflation or um, you know, interest rate hikes are really all about demand side, not supply side. And I heard Trump talk about all these things they're going to work on that has to do with this supply side to drop down prices, but who knows if any of that will actually get passed and how much of that will actually happen. So if you could stare in a crystal ball, what do you think is going to happen over the next 2 years?
Growth at all costs, cutting red tape, and then I think keeping our taxes lower for longer is kind of a given. They might do a little bit extra. You would know a little bit more by probably the middle of 2025 because it's the 100 days is a very real thing. It's called making the Washington pork sausage for a reason. Like who's going to get what for there, and then you got my vote, right? And so you'll know by what they can actually get done because cue the song that kids learn about how bills become laws. There's a lot that goes in between, and you need time for these things. And January 1st of 2026, all these people go back and start trying to get reelected again. So you have basically 2025 to be able to figure out what you can get done and then work on getting it through all the different ins and outs. Um, I've learned from my police clients that there's usually a story here, there's a story here, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. And so I think we got some good things coming where you can try to ramp up building, but that takes a lot of people and a lot of supplies to get going, and you just can't fix a housing problem that fast. You certainly can start stopping what's going on and start moving towards that, but I think generally being more business friendly is a great thing because you'll get a lot more investments coming in from the investment community. Um, and I've always found a great deal of worth by working. Um, I think if we can incentivize people through, I love during the campaign when it said no taxes on tips. That was pretty interesting to throw out there because I see all kinds of hardworking waiters and waitresses, and their wage is like $2.35, I think, most places, and then they survive off of tips. My wife is from Germany originally, and so over there they pay them a livable wage. And so if you've ever been over there before, you don't really tip people that much.
Yeah.
So it's pretty unique on both fronts. But I think that we can start growing again and start getting in the right direction on things. And it didn't happen overnight, like our national debt. It's not going to go away overnight. You just got to stop digging the hole we've been in and start working our way out of it.
Yeah, talk about
I've
debt
heard that
row.
message. Yeah, exactly. And by the way, we're never going to pay off this debt. We're marching towards 40 trillion. The only way is to keep growing as much debt that we have and grow out of it and keep it somewhere around 100% or less if we can, which is where we're at before COVID.
Yeah, interesting. There's when you get past all the news, which makes us money off of dispensing hate, fear, uh, they get clicks, and that's how they make their money. When you get past all of that, you start listening to what people actually are saying and actually doing, not the commentary by the quote unquote experts. Um, it's very interesting. I get a very, very different picture than what the news says is happening. So I'm very curious if they say is actually going to occur, and we'll know here in the next probably 3 or 4 months how much actually happens. But they got a lot of momentum, and let's see how far that goes before, like you said, 2026 rolls around and everyone starts campaigning again to at least all the senators and um, you know Congress people uh, really start using the same rhetoric to get the clicks, the likes, and subscribes, etc. Uh,
Hmm.
for their own campaigns. And it's a very, very complicated mess. I worked in DC for a year um, at
All right.
USAID, and oh my goodness, with President Obama, his administration, the National Security Council, is like we would say, "Hey, this is what's happening," and they would say, "That's not going to be
Is
very good
that correct?
optics." Yeah, so we need to shape it this way, and like that's not what's happening. Okay, that's on you guys. I'm just going to inform you what's happening. So we'll see. We'll see what the optics are coming out of these things, and we'll see what actually happens. Which most Americans don't ever take the time to figure out what is reality versus what is optics.
Hmm. You
Self-control.
brought up, you brought up, yeah, you self-control and research, and you brought up a good point about traveling. And the great thing about having my family spread out is that I travel, right? And so this year alone, and even last year when they were crying about recessions going on, um, one of the number one and two things that can be cut out of budgets typically is traveling and restaurants. And I haven't seen an unpacked restaurant or airport in a really long time. I actually flew into LaGuardia in '08 in the fall, and when I was going up and playing drums, and it was damn near empty. And my buddies that came and picked me up, they're like, "Whoa, that is not what's going on right now here." Um, People seem to be out and living their best lives now. You only live once instead of perhaps saving ahead. But I try to keep curious, and that's what I tell everybody else is go source your information. So I teach my daughters, I'm like, you should fact check daddy. I have the gift of gab. Sometimes you have, numbers that go up and down, but go research, travel, and check it out and look around for news.
Yeah, that's good because now you have to fact check the fact checkers. Because I watched a whole
Yep.
bunch of fact checkers on the presidential campaign or stuff, and I was like, "That's not true." And you go look it up, and it's not true. The fact checker just spread some misinformation. You're like, "Holy cow, this thing is a
This is
crazy hamster
this
wheel."
is the age we live in now, and you have AI on top of it where you can make, me or you by just probably taking 10 seconds of this pod recreate us and have us saying anything they want. And
Yeah,
I've watched some funny sports coaches, like they take the memes from these guys, and you start laughing. But that's scary that they can have the technology to do that these days.
it's
So
it's
always
pretty
research,
scary.
research. Yeah.
I'll I'll bring it back to what you said earlier. Break out another thousand, and I'm seeing the same thing. People are living their best lives. They're just breaking out the extra thousand, and I feel like people are living, and the stats are supporting this. Is that Americans didn't want to give up the way that they were living in 2021 when the markets were great. And even though now the markets are extremely difficult, we just, instead of spending the cash we have, we're spending debt at an alarming rate. And
Hmm.
it hasn't really been slowing down that much, which is in insane. Well, Drew,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you
Yeah.
so
My
much
advice for
for,
everybody, my advice
yeah,
for everybody out there watching, if that's you, stop digging first. Get some kind of plan put in place. And I'm living, breathing proof that you can get ahead no matter what hole you find yourself in. So Plan out. It's all about a plan.
It's all about a plan. If that's you, or you want to learn more, please reach out to Drew and, you know, stop digging the hole. If you're, yeah, I love that. Um, when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. Love that.
Great quote.
So, Drew, thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you so much for helping people get a hold of their financial lives. Thank you so much for bringing it to the current reality of um, where we are at in this world, how music connects to, our finances, how we think about things, how we perceive things. Renting a fancy life is not the way to do it, as those hip hop stars were doing, but really doing this through control and, having that plan that you can execute. So please tell the folks listening to this call, how can they reach you?
Yeah, you can go to hiphopxfinance.com. The book's available on Amazon. Check it out. It's a very light read. There's lots of great graphics in here. The stories will make you laugh sometimes. You probably won't be crying a whole lot, but you'll be laughing and learning. And it's very visual for a reason and all color, so it can tell the stories and make it more come to life. So you can go to hiphopxfinance.com. Reach out to me. I love to hear from everybody and try to help out the best I can going forward.
Thank you so much, Drew. We'll make sure those links are in the show notes so that people can reach out and find you. And man, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to Clean Money, where we talk about sustainable investing that improves society. We are passionate about creating great investment returns to investors who want to use their money to make a positive social impact in the world. If you enjoyed the episode, we'd appreciate a 5-star review. And if you are interested in making your investing matter, please connect with us at wildmountaincapital.com, or you can find me, Samuel Sells, on LinkedIn, on Twitter at Sells_Samuel, on Instagram at Clean Money Sam, or on Facebook. And finally, make your investing matter.